Hello, and welcome to another episode of Leader Generation, brought to you by Mata. I'm your host, Tessa Burg, and today I am joined by Mel Morris. He is the CEO of Corpora.ai, and they have launched a brand new AI research engine. But before we get into learning more about Corpora, Mel, who is an experienced entrepreneur in the tech sector, has seen many waves of new technology come through the market, is going to share his insights on AI, automation, and the future of AI in business. Mel, thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Tess. I really appreciate the chance to chat through. I've been looking forward to this all week, so let's go for it.
Awesome. And before we jumped on this call, you told me a little bit about your background, and it is quite impressive. You're a true entrepreneur. You see what's possible, you know how to build businesses, create value for your audience. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey.
Sure. Well, I mean, my journey started out literally in the 1970s, having literally just left high school, wanted to get into technology. Jobs were very hard to come by. I ended up getting an interview and started a job with a company making pork pies and sausages. And I was doing sort of data collection type activities. I could see the computer through the window, but that's about as close as I got to it. Got quite bored. One day, one of the ladies there said, "Oh, why are you looking so grumpy?" I said, "Well, I really want to get into writing software." And she said, "Oh, my husband's actually the computer manager for EW Bliss." It was a company owned by Gulf and Western, of all people. And she said, "Why don't you go and see him?" So I went to see him. He said, "Well, look, take 2 weeks off work, come and see if you can write software with us and the team. Let's see how you get on. We'll do some basic training." And I said, "Well, I've run out of all my vacation time, so I'll just have my resignation in and I'll come and try the 2 weeks. If it doesn't work out, we know what's going to happen. If it does, happy days for all of us." And I was about 3-4 days into it, and I was offered the job. And there was this young guy, Jed Dunkel, who was about 26. He was probably one of the first people to ever get a computer science degree in the UK. It was that early in terms of tech. And he decided he was going to teach me everything he could so he could put his feet up and just watch me do things. And I found that was fascinating, but extremely rewarding. And I learned very quickly how to write software in low-level languages, to understand how machines operate and what happened. And that set me up on a path that basically really set me up in really good stead going forward. But as things progressed, I found I had a knack for writing software. I was given lots of opportunity to do that. But at 18, I got a team of 15 people working for me in what was then called National Bus Company, and the head of their software development team. And two years later, I started my first consulting business. And then since then, there's been 7 or 8 tech companies that I've started, developed, and then built up and sold on. And I enjoy that. I enjoy the creation of technology. I enjoy building it. I enjoy taking it to market. I'm not so keen on the bit that follows that, on the basis that once it becomes very repetitive and things, I tend to get bored and want to move on to other things. But I love challenges. One of my key phrases with the tech team is, until you come back and say it's impossible, it probably isn't worth as much as you think it is.
That's a great piece of guidance. And some of the companies that you've led, chairman of King Digital Entertainment, the global hit Candy Crush saga, I've definitely heard of that. Have you, over your entire journey, are there universal truths or patterns that you've seen that are happening again today and that you've learned from? And so when you look at the changing marketing landscape, what's going on in the world as far as how we buy and sell, evolving, and AI, what sort of truths have you unearthed that you can apply to navigate what's going on?
Well, I think the first thing is that with all new technologies, we always, certainly from the point of view of entrepreneurs and developers of technology, we nearly always start out with this view that it's going to rule the world. We always think that. We've thought that over many generations of things. And so we start with that view. And I think God has a great thing called a hype cycle, which covers a lot of this sort of from a perspective of what does it mean. And it says we start out with these inflated expectations. We then get a little bit sort of disgruntled when it's not quite performing as well as we hoped. And then we start to go into what they call this plateau, and and then we get this realization of what the real value of something is. And so, that's happened many times over. but I've never seen it happen with the intensity and the speed with which AI has actually gripped things. I mean, I've lived through the dot-com boom, the bubble of 2000 and how that happened, and this is very different. So to a lot of people, AI only actually existed after ChatGPT was launched.
Mhm.
It had been going on for decades, but actually that was the first time people got introduced to it. And even then, I was so excited to play around with it. It's fantastic. Look at all these things it can do. And then eventually you start to realize that, yes, it can do lots of things, but sometimes it gets things badly wrong. And sometimes it doesn't quite do what you expect it to do. So again, we all had this expectation that it was going to do things. And now a reality is setting in that it's impressive, but we have to be really sort of careful about how we plan about using things to get the best out of it.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting. We see different reactions depending on individuals' roles within a marketing organization, but also depending on their level of comfort with technology at all. So some people came in at the beginning of digital marketing, and so they're very comfortable with that set of technologies, sort of not understanding or realizing that they have learned new things before. And now,
Yeah.
they feel like they're in this, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. But what it, and I was telling you before the call, we did a client survey, and there's like this distribution of where AI falls in terms of priority. And what I found most interesting, when you ask marketers, what do they need to get done this year? What's keeping them up at night? It's, how do I best reach my customers? How do I better understand my customers? How do I show an ROI on my marketing? How do I maximize my budget? And those challenges have always existed. And they're not saying AI is something that has to get done. They're saying I have the same challenges. I got to figure out how to solve them. But how will AI impact business as they try to always strive to be bigger, better, faster, more efficient?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Certainly, I think the way that I approach this is to say, firstly, be very careful in understanding what you think is the competition, because AI has this sort of happy knack of being able to benefit those with the least skills or talent the most. It upskills the bottom of the tree. Therefore, the average moves up with that. And so now all of a sudden, people have to fight harder. Now, today, I think it's not just a question of obviously getting out the right marketing message. Pretty much any company now can produce really credible presentation materials. They can produce really great business strategy documents with the help of AI. Those companies might never have been able to do that previously. They wouldn't have had the skill sets, couldn't have afforded to hire the people in to do that. So for marketeers, I think it's really quite challenging now for them to understand that it is going to get harder to make your message become unique and stand out. That's going to be much, much more difficult. And people that actually don't have the basic skill sets are still going to produce really credible materials. So you've got to be really mindful of that. And so understanding that the game moves up from the bottom, it moves up. And therefore, we've got to fight harder to stand out. We've got to become more empowered. And we've got to really understand where our really true, unique qualities are in what it is that we're trying to market. Because everyone else will be putting out things that says they do all the same things, but actually, when you dig down, there always will be those unique strengths that companies have. And you have to focus on those and make sure that they're not lost in the noise of what everyone else is doing.
And when we focus on what unique strengths are, I mean, that's really positioning. And it's almost like people have to set aside being threatened by the average moving up. I've heard some people say they think people are feeling more vulnerable and exposed, or maybe questioning, like, oh, maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was, as opposed to leaning into, here's the baseline, the average has moved up. Where can I take this? Where can it go? And how can I take those unique points of views, our positioning, and start to amplify it? What advice would you give for marketers as they think about that positioning? I mean, it sounds easy to be like, just don't be threatened by it. It's like, these are exercises that, marketers have been really good at in the past. And I almost feel like maybe it's just the flood of AI information and hype that's overwhelming them?
Possibly. I think it's important that basically people must not dismiss the benefits of AI. It's easy to do so. I don't need to go and do that with AI. Maybe you don't. But if it might save you 50, 60, 70% of the time to do that, use it to do that. Use the free time you've now got to put the human element into this thing, the creativity that you as an individual can put in place. And if you think about things, whether we talk about search or AI or whatever, the faster things are done, you get into a groove with things, you get into a certain mindset that feeds off that speed. If something takes 20 minutes to do, you've already started daydreaming about something else. If something takes 2 seconds, you're on it, you're focused on it, you get that flow going with things. So even the people at the top of the tree must make sure that they're not doing things that are taking longer to do than those at the bottom of the tree can do because they don't have the skills. So they have to rely on AI. You have to use AI. You cannot afford not to. It's the very worst, the very least it can be is a time saver for you. Even if it doesn't necessarily do better quality output than you might do yourself, if it saves you time, you're ahead of the curve. Use that time wisely to use your own creativity then to be able to pull out the really important things. And it's not just about saying what we're unique with, it's getting it into what does that mean? So what? What does that mean to the customers, to the audience you're trying to appeal to? So what? What does it mean? And if you focus on that side of things, what my uniques are, what the company's uniques are, what that means to my target audience, what are the benefits of that? You always get back to an old IBM phrase of feature benefits, feature benefits, feature benefits. And I think with AI, people at the top of the tree, I think, can actually say, well, you know something, I'm saving 70% of my time doing all these lower level pieces using AI. I've now got a lot more time available to be creative.
You brought up two really important points that I think I want to highlight. One, know who the competition is. I think a lot of people, when they look at AI tech and they're evaluating it, are trying to see, does it do everything I do? Does it do every step within this process? And what level of quality does it complete these steps? And we wouldn't want it to do everything. And if your measurement for whether or not I will start is how good do I personally think that this is, then you'll never get started. And that brings it to point two, where you said, just try to use it to save time to start with.
Yeah.
You, as a human with creativity, yeah, you should be better than ChatGPT.
You should, absolutely. You should.
Darn.
I mean, I think there are three vectors to this, and I think they apply to pretty much most of technology, and that's speed, quality, and cost. Okay. And if you think about those three things, then they're really important to keep in place. What you don't want to be doing is using AI in the wrong ways. Now, how can that happen? Well, I'll give you examples of it. People can start daydreaming with AI. They can lose track. They don't get focused. I can ask this, I'll try that, I'll do this. So you've got to be focused on what you're doing. You've got to understand the quality of what you're producing. You want to do it quickly, and you want to do it for the least cost. Now, I say to people, would you use ChatGPT to add up your shopping bill? Of course you wouldn't. So find the right tools at the right time to do the job and be efficient about what you're doing with your time. Your time is the one quantity and resource that you're totally in control of. So maximize that. If you maximize your time, you actually make sure that you become more valuable to your business, right? You start to produce more things, everything gets better. But if you sit back and think, well, I don't need to use AI, you're eventually going to get caught up by all those people with much less skill who are using AI to compete. There's a 10x factor sometimes with AI. Make sure you're using it.
Yeah. No, I just love that piece of advice. So when we look at your current company, where does it sit in adding value to the audience? I mean, I'm sure you applied a same approach. You thought about where it could deliver value. You thought about getting to know the audience better and your company's strengths. Tell us a little bit about Corpora.ai.
Well, it's an interesting story because we've had the technology developed for several years, as a lot of the AI companies have, by the way. We all think of AI as being, October 22 when ChatGPT was launched, but we'd all been doing this stuff for almost decades before that. So, there's a lot of history behind what we're doing and what the whole AI movement has been doing. But from the point of view of Corpora, we wanted to set out, again, looking at those things: quality, speed, and cost. And our belief was, at the end of the day, we are actually helping people research things. That's all about trying to look at vast quantities of information. You want to be able to do that very effectively. You want to be able to do it very quickly. And you sure as hell will want to do it very cheaply as well. So when you think about those things, they're the things that we focused on. So are we necessarily going to do things 10 times better? Probably not, because most of the tools are pretty much similar. Are we going to be able to do it much faster? Absolutely. We'll be able to do it much cheaper? Yes, we will. So those are the things that we're focusing on. But we're approaching this whole AI space not from the point of view of large language models, reasoning models, and that side of it. We're approaching it from the other end, which is the data. So with the data that we have, we're able to actually be able to answer questions much faster. We'll be able to look at information far more deeply. And the quality of the results you can get are a function of those two characteristics. So we hope to be able to deliver high quality results much faster and very much cheaper.
And that really aligns to what you're talking about earlier. Make sure you know what problem you're trying to solve. And I know marketers have lots of challenges when it comes to data. And one of them is getting the right data efficiently. I still see a lot of people pulling data from multiple resources, trying to compile them themselves, putting things in Excel sheets, spending a bunch of time organizing. And then it just takes forever to get to the part where you're thinking about it. And I think this is a great example of where AI like helps take some of that, what you were saying, like, where are you spending your time? Like maybe you shouldn't be spending your time just compiling and organizing. You get to spend more time on the actual thinking.
Well, I think it's interesting. I think one of the things that we've seen with AI is that people tend to rely on it probably too much. They're sort of almost wanting it to do their job for them. And there's always a danger with that, because you never know whether has it really looked at the breadth and depth of information available. What is the judgment and reasoning that it's used? So you're almost being presented with a set of answers where you don't really know necessarily the formulation of the information that went into that result. So it's very important that people have the tools that allow them to rapidly look at things from many different perspectives. So, for example, let's say we were building, I mean, we saw Donald Trump announce this week that Americans are going to build the most powerful warplane ever. Okay. So from that perspective, you could look at that topic and say, well, how might you want to look at what that might include? Well, you could look at it from the point of view of a pilot. You could look at it from the point of view of a scientific politician looking at how to advise governments on how they should position these things, where they should sell them, what they should do. You could look at it from the perspective of how effective would it be in a warfare environment. There's so many different angles you could take. So the information that's out there is vast, even on that type of topic. But it's not just saying you can't possibly look at all the information. Therefore, you have to be able to distill it down to the things that really matter to you. And that's quite a challenge with AI, because people are saying, well, I want to look at a sixth generation warplane. I want it to do this, this, and this. What should I do? And they're half expecting you to come out with the designs for Boeing to follow, or to tell it exactly what weapons it'll have on board. That's ridiculous. But people are using ChatGPT, these sorts of tools, to actually get to write the entire job for them. And I think in so doing, they get a really fancy report out, but they don't know the substance behind it. They're not quite sure the accuracy of it. So what we're saying is here you've got to really look at the amount of data available. You've got to understand the perspective you want to take in analyzing that data. What are the real things under the surface? And you don't want to turn up at a meeting and someone says, well, where did this number come from? I have no idea. It came from ChatGPT. It's like, that's not really defensible. So we want to see AI being used by people to allow them to do their job better, not necessarily to do their job for them. That's a dangerous place to go.
Yeah, I agree. And when you start to see people letting specifically ChatGPT do their job for them, or even coding tools, and we were talking about that
Yeah.
earlier, there's some like almost tells where you can see it's too wordy, it's over designed, it is not specific to this audience. Or like, did you generate this or did you think about it? And those who are early on in their journey, or to your point, have lower skills, are overusing the AI and the tools, and it isn't happening in a process where quality testing is introduced. But I think the bigger problem is too, a lot of leaders the way to embed quality is that you're very clear on expectations, goals, and the points it occurs in the process. Because, for example, when we're talking about code assistants, anyone now can build, quote unquote, an app, but
Yep.
you don't create value until someone that you're serving, a client or a customer, is able to use what you built to meet their own goals and objectives. And you can spend all day writing mediocre copy, mediocre content, but if mediocre code, mediocre apps, but if people aren't able to get tremendous value or generate an emotion, that's what marketers are all about. And that takes creativity and that takes empathy. Then you're not going to be that AI, doesn't matter how much crap it turns out, it won't be able to scale at a value equation.
Yeah, I mean, I think the word that sums this up is if you take the nth degree and say, well, we've got, let's say, 10,000 companies trying to attack a particular challenge with a software development. All right. It's not inconceivable to say, well, okay, so I produce this code. Do I know if the code that's been produced might infringe patents that other people have? Do I actually understand exactly how it works and what it does? Could I defend it if someone said, well, we think you're infringing our patent? You wouldn't have a clue. You wouldn't know. But more importantly than that, across those 10,000 companies that now all use AI to produce the code, the word that was summed up is ubiquity. They're likely to have ubiquity across all of the solutions. And for a marketeer, that is a nightmare. We're now one of 10,000 people that can do this. And if you're not careful, it's then a question, well, who will do it the cheapest? Who will do it the fastest? That's all that matters then. All right. So we almost take out functionality out of the picture. They all do the same thing, supposedly. I mean, interestingly enough, one of my young Gen Z developers here the other week, who we started down the path of really starting to understand how you could use AI to develop code. And he actually said, I want you to build me a Candy Crush lookalike. And it actually produced a match 3 game running in Python on his desktop in less than a minute. My point is that if we are saying now that actually the value of creative software is diminished, it's important that the software that we're producing stands out. It's also important to make sure that it doesn't just stand out as being functionally different, but it has to stand out in terms of getting traction as well. And that's much more challenging, particularly when there's 10,000 apps all doing the same thing. I mean, just for the user to go down, say, oh, I've searched for a match 3 game and the App Store now got 10,000 games that are doing match 3 games. That's a challenge. And we have to be really careful of these things. So I think ubiquity sums up a lot of what happens with these things. And I think what we're trying to search for is how do we get really high value content? And I think that requires AI and human endeavor in combination to be able to get the best result. And I think that's going to be the case for quite a long time to come. But the average of the rest will be really good. We have to be careful with that.
Yeah, I love that message because it is a balance, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not, should you use AI? Should you not? Can it
No.
do this? Can it not? It's not black and white. It's finding how to navigate the gray and keep testing, keep trying, see where it helps save you time. But the challenges that we're facing, elevating our strengths, communicating those strengths in a way that's personalized to our audience and delivers value to them is still what we're trying. That's still our path forward and requires collaboration and strategic thinking.
Well, it does. And you only have to look at some of the sort of horror stories that we've already seen. That the stateside lawsuit where the guys actually came out with a set of case law which never existed. The case has never actually existed, and ended up being in contempt of court. a similar thing happened in Australia only a few weeks ago. And so, we look at, let's say you're a massive consulting firm, and now, you've got some people inside there who blagged their way into the job, and they're able to produce really high quality looking output in the way of consulting reports, but are entirely AI generated. What value did that actually create? Because if the customer realized that, they'd have just done the prompts themselves,
Right.
right? They wouldn't have bothered paying a big fortune to a consulting firm to do that. So we have to get into a point where we can distinguish what I call high quality human AI hybrid content that actually exhibits the best of both. And it's getting that balance of the best of both. And come back to your marketeers. That's what they have to do. We have to be able to show our own qualities, as well as making sure we absolutely use AI as much as we need to ensure we've got the time to bring out that final twist of lemon or whatever it is that we might need to put in place to be able to make this thing stand out.
Yes, I agree. So when we think about Corpora and its strengths, and I would say there's like 13 new startups today, back to like that C of like, geez, how do you even differentiate? Where do you feel like, and maybe it's from the legacy of the product and that this isn't new, this didn't just hit market, but where are you finding in this new company that you're leading, or not new company, but new to me, that it delivers the most value and the unique position that you're owning?
Well, I'll give you three different data points on this. We had produced really, really brilliant product for exploring data on a particular topic. October 22, the world changed. ChatGPT was launched. And I said to my team that day, I said, watch this. This is going to change everything. The expectation, the way people interface with applications, the way they do things, it's going to change. We have to address that. All right. Now, we're not an AI language model, so we have to understand how our data sets can play and be enhanced by AI, and can also enhance AI itself. So we started down the path, and we've got to a stage where in the last 3 months, we've seen so many announcements. The DeepSeek revelation, all right, that came out. It rocked the market. I think a lot of it was overstated, but it rocked the market. There's some really clever stuff in the middle of all that, but it had a massive impact. Now, since then, when we launched Corpora as a research engine back in November, December last year, and since then, I think there's been 5 companies come out with what they call an AI deep research tool. All right, that's happened. And since then, we've seen announcement after announcement, and I believe now the time for someone to have a unique play is about 2 weeks in the AI space. Within 2 weeks, somebody come and said, me too, I can do that, we can do that. Look, we can do that. We can do it nearly as well or better or cheaper or whatever. So those things are happening all the time. It's a 2-week lifetime between having a unique position to now being one of many people doing that. And in many ways, people underestimate that AI already today, large language models, are capable, so capable, that you can take someone else's product offering, you can teach an existing AI system or get help from it to upskill the AI component to compete with what that other product's doing. It's happening sometimes in hours, but it's certainly happening within days and a couple of weeks. So you have to be able to look for enduring strengths and benefits. And we're saying, look, if we think we can do a better job with the data, that's a very easy one to be able to understand. People look at 2 sets of output, they either believe that's got more depth or it hasn't, but that's something that they can look at. And there's a certain subjectivity to that. But when it comes to speed and cost, we know what we've got is capable of actually bringing about orders of magnitude benefits in being much faster and much cheaper. And I'm not talking about, 1.5 times or like DeepSeek's 4 or 5 times faster or, 4 or 5 times cheaper. I'm talking about orders of magnitude faster and orders of magnitude cheaper. And going back to my point previously, that the faster something is and the cheaper it is, the more you will do.
Mm-hmm.
You'll use it more. You'll use it more. You'll get more benefit from it. You'll end up getting into that real flow of things that you're able to ask fast, rapid questions. Think about search. When search comes back really quickly and gives you the answer you want, you move on. But if search comes back with a load of really disparate answers, you're not sure what they are, eventually you stop using it because you've run out of time, not because you've necessarily found the answer. So there's a real correlation for the humans in this thing, which says the quicker and faster and cheaper it is to do something, the more inclined they're going to be to use it, and more likely, the more productivity they'll have with that. So we're actually placing our bets on those three factors: speed, quality, cost.
Yeah, and quality is so important because given if everyone has access to the same models, if everyone has access to the same apps, it really comes down to what are you putting through? What's the data in, data out within those models and those apps? And so that's where your business is focused, is getting the most value in the quality and making sure it becomes a habit for people who know how to ask the right questions too. And
well, we've seen this, and the existing quote deep research offerings that are out there, we don't think are particularly deep, right? We know they're very expensive, and we know they're very slow. So we see the competition, we see what they're doing, we watch them intensely, and we're sitting back, and we're not actually in competition with them. We can make all of these AI offerings faster, cheaper, and better. We're agnostic to the models involved. So our play here really is to make sure we can showcase what our capabilities are, and that those three characteristics are really evident when people use our technology. So that's where we sit, and that's what we're trying to do. And it's very interesting. The DeepSeek thing to me was a really interesting datum point for AI, because listen, what those guys did, I think, from the point of view of the PR that they did, was phenomenal. I think the tech is good, but fundamentally, I think it got way out of control in terms of how the market reacted to that.
yeah, I agree. But it was fun to test. I mean, we
It
jumped right,
was, yeah.
like let's learn
I
more.
did too. Me too.
Yeah. And I loved the conversation that came out of it. But to your point, it was
Yeah.
like I was like, man, like I never spent so long on Twitter as I did after DeepSeek was launched. And people brought up some great points, pointing to different types of research, pointing to different security and governance and compliance concerns. I'm like, this is the most education I got in such a short amount of time. But yeah, it didn't change our approach as much as, because we're also not building foundational models. But to your point, for our company, your company, anyone in tech, or even selling any product, staying focused on the problems you're trying to solve and where you provide value is really important.
Yeah, I think DeepSeek did a really good job of that, and of course, again, that they then of course ended up with more traffic than they could possibly deal with, which again, and basically wasn't because it did a better job. It was because basically, fundamentally, it was cheaper and faster.
Right.
It didn't even say it was doing a better job. It just says we're cheaper and faster. That's all they said.
Yep. That is true. So our time is up. This has been such an engaging, interesting conversation. So thank you, Mel, for coming on today and sharing your insights. If people want to talk to you more, where can they reach you?
And ever so easy. So my email address is mel.morris@corpora.ai.
And if you want to hear more episodes of Leader Generation, you can find them on our website at modop.com. That's MODOP.com. You can look under the Vanguardian or search for Leader Generation wherever you listen to your podcast. Until next time, Mel, I hope we get another chance to talk. I hope you have a great week.
Thanks, Tessa. Really enjoyed it. Take care.